Record.
Well,
Hi,
hey
people.
guys, how we doing?
We are
No,
live. We are live. This is our fourth episode.
hmm
And just for logistics, just for the record, to let the audience know that, and to let you know, Jordan, this one won't be released, I think, until next week, because we just released one yesterday and we're trying to do these weekly.
my public will be very disappointed.
Well, for money, we could release it sooner, but I just wanted to. And I'm in California per normal, but I'm talking to two New Jersey people, which is
For
great.
now, yeah, I live in the city normally, but here I am holed up in Jersey for my COVID residence.
On the Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
At some point, Jordan, we're going to talk to you about those thousands of CDs that are in the shelves behind you. But let's start off. Talk about your first Jazz Fest. When was it? How did you learn about it? And what was one of the highlights from that Jazz Fest?
So my first Jazz Fest, I was dating my girlfriend, who had gone the year before. She had gone in, I think, 91, and I went in 92. She brought me in 92. And we went for the first weekend. We had no money. But immediately fell in love. And then with Jazz Fest and eventually each other. We got married as well. So that's Nancy. And then we've been almost every year since. She missed, I think we both missed 1 year because we didn't have any money. And then she missed a year because she was too pregnant to fly, and gave me the quote. I was like, I wasn't going to go, but she's like, if you were pregnant, I'd go. So that gave me the the excuse to be able to go.
Was there anything from that first Jazz Fest that just hooked you right away that you thought, oh my God, I got to come back here?
It not only was my first Jazz Fest, thinking back on it, it was really my first music festival of any kind. So, and my first time in New Orleans, except for one New Year's driving through for some bizarre thing. But so it was the city, it was the vibe, it was the purple houses, it was the lagniappes, it was the community, it was everything like that made it great.
Very nice.
And I think we stayed on like underneath. A friend of ours had a brother who was in a frat house, and we slept underneath their dining room table because that was like a horizontal surface that nobody was going to step on us.
God, I love that.
Man, that's dedication. I bet you that same spot is available on Airbnb this year for about
Probably.
$1,000 a night.
Right.
So that's been, I can't do the math right now, but that's quite a few jazz fests.
It's a lot.
Almost 30 years.
Yeah, we started with one weekend a year, and then I think it became too painful to miss the other weekend. So as soon as we could figure it out, we started going both weekends. So I would say after like 5 or 6 years, we started doing both weekends.
Yeah, I feel that. I kind of am always in that same position where I'm like, this is the year I'm just going to do one weekend. And that never happens. It always grows. It always takes on a life of its own. So of all of those many years, can you highlight a few performances that are just the standouts for you? What made them so great? What were they?
I mean, so at the Fairgrounds, the Fairgrounds is half my Jazz Fest experience, or maybe even less than half my Jazz Fest experience. The rest is the stuff at the clubs at night, because we see 2 or 3 shows a night every night after Jazz Fest. So the ones that come to mind, if you're limiting me to the Fairgrounds, I would say Rhiannon Giddens in the Blues Tent, even though that's not my favorite venue. One or both years was incredible. I knew her from the Carolina Chocolate Drops. I went and saw her do her own thing, and that was great. Any of the Andrew Duhon sets at like the Lagniappe stage. I think the Royal Finger Bowl set where Beetle Bob got up on stage and they shot him, like pantomime shooting him. the Campbell brothers, who are just fantastic. And I'm so glad they're back this year. But really, at the Fairgrounds, for me, it's not really about one set of music. It's about all the music that you can see in one day. Like I am not a camper. I'm a grazer, and I will go to. It's tiring to follow me around at the Fairgrounds. And Nancy and I will either go together or we'll split up and just meet each other up. Back at the very beginning, there were no cell phones, so it was just those message boards. I don't know if anyone remembers the message board where you put little sticky notes in a box. Our little code was Xena Nation because Xena was like in the Z's and no one ever had messages in the Z's. They were easy to find. Everyone else used their last name, which was whatever. But yeah, that's so. But at night, I think the best show I ever saw at night was at the Old Point Bar. Mark Stone put together a gig that was the Campbell brothers, Shannon McNally, Dave Easley, and like 20 other people who were phenomenal, singing backup. Arlie Leonard was there, it was just, I think, the best concert I've ever been to.
That is nice. I remember that Royal Finger Bowl show. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. Right. And I'm sure there's 10 others that if you mentioned it, I'd be like, oh yeah, that was the best one.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me.
I think when I met you 13 years ago or so, you and your wife had your kids with you.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Talk about how it is bringing your kids. Talk about any tips you might have for other people who want to bring their kids.
So I've always been an and person, not an or person. So it's like Jazz Fest or kids or the festival or nighttime shows. Nancy and I are both and people. We like to do all of the above. So when we had kids, we were like, for a lot of people that changed their lives. Or when we got married, for a lot of people when they got married, that changed their lives. Like we still go see 2 to 3 shows a week when there's no global pandemic happening. But when there isn't, like when we could do that, we still see 2 to 3 shows a week at night, or 1 to 3, depending on the week. So when we had kids, we were blessed with Nancy's mother. So Grandma Carol was the reason that we could do Jazz Fest the way we would do it. So what we would do is when it was just one, it was just Nate. And then when Nola was born, it was Nate and Nola. And we would just rent a house, walking distance to the Fairgrounds always. That's our only criteria. And we would go to the Fairgrounds from 11 to 7. The kids had a great time. Nancy was pretty much not on kid duty because she's been on kid duty for a lot of the year. It was me and Carol who were on kid duty. I would put Nate in a backpack because that was the easiest way to carry him, and the strollers like get low and hot and sweaty. So I would say if you're able to walk with a kid on your back, that backpack over the stroller, so much better. And then, you got to sunscreen them up and water them up as much as possible. And maybe with a kid, you don't get to stand in the front row anymore. You have to move back a little bit. So you just got to be flexible. Like when the kids wanted to, like when they were little or big enough to want to play on the beach, we would let them play on the beach, which is the racetrack essentially. And people would come up to us and say, you know what goes on that racetrack, like you know what they're digging up. And I was like, yeah, but they're, you can watch them. It made them so happy to dig around in there and play around in there. They weren't eating the sand. It was, so you have to be really flexible. And if you can't be flexible, if you can't change your plans, then maybe you need to figure out something else for your kids than bringing them. But for us, because of Carol, she gave us the ultimate flexibility in the sense that we get back to the apartment at like 7:30, right? Because we always go Jazz Fest the full time. We always go 11 to 7. We're there every minute of Jazz Fest. And then when the kids are at like 7 o'clock, we would quickly cook them some pasta or something easy, put them to sleep, and then we would go out, and Carol would stay with the kids, and we would come out at like 4 or 5. Come back at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and they would wake up at like 6 or 7 in the morning. And then she would magically whisk them out of the house to like a playground so we could sleep till 10. And the difference between getting 2 hours of sleep and getting like 5 hours of sleep is incredible. And so we all, so if you don't have a Grandma Carol, I don't, you know, you got to find a different arrangement. But for us, that made it possible.
I just want to know, where do you find the stamina to do 11 a.m. to 4 a.m.?
Yeah. So this is a question that I get asked a lot. And I don't have to be that smart when I'm in New Orleans. I really just have to be able to count my change. And if I have my kids with me, count to 2 to make sure they're both there. So like, I don't have to be operating at full mental capacity. So I find that just the music keeps me going. And I have a couple secrets that I use or rules that I use to allow myself to do that. One is you have to have a partner who pushes you to go out. So like if you're going with somebody or who's fine with you just going out by yourself. So Nancy will be like, I'm sleeping tonight, and I'll just be like, okay, see you later. And then like, I buy some tickets ahead of time to make sure I use them, because it's so easy just to say, oh, I'm not going to go out tonight and I haven't bought a ticket, so it's fine. Because you never regret the shows you go see, I find. The other rule I have is dinner is death. Like literally going out to dinner at a nice restaurant in New Orleans, it's slow, it is rich. I've done it once and I was like, how does everyone not go to sleep immediately after that thing? So I don't do that. And the other thing I do is like when I'm at the fairgrounds at around 5 or 6, I stop drinking beer and I just switch to water or like Barks or the fountain Coke in the racetrack or something like that, just to not overserve myself before I even get started.
I can see a line of t-shirts, dinner is death.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I also love the second set of every show. I always feel like the second set is better than the first. And I'm an eternal optimist. So every time I go out, I think it's going to be the best show I've ever seen.
I love this. This is great.
Just so much wisdom. I love the being an and person. That's like totally like just very, very inspiring, right? I feel like we create false dilemmas, right? We have to make a choice when, you know, you shouldn't have to choose between your passions, right? You know, there's certain times you have to make sacrifices in life, but why sacrifice 2 joys? Just
Right.
and them.
And when my kids were first born, we realized we had to sacrifice something because there's less time, right? So we sacrificed 2 things. So Nancy and I sacrificed going out together sometimes, right? Like she would go out with her friends one night, I would go out another night. And then we also had my brother, who was a fantastic babysitter and was willing to do it at the drop of a hat. So we had built-in babysitting. So the other thing we sacrificed was sleep. Like you can survive on less sleep. It's just okay. But it takes some training to do that. I think there will come a time when we slow down. I hope that's not this year.
You'll have to report back to us after Fest and let us know if after taking an unplanned break, things that you sustained your previous pace.
There are things that have changed. Like my first couple fests, I remember going and all I would wear was like a bathing suit, no shirt, no shoes or socks. We would just kind of like park somewhere along Ursuline or something like that and walk in. And I would walk in barefoot with no shirt and no anything. And now I don't do that anymore.
I'll bet. So before we move on from the subject of your family, were there ever any times where you did not want to bring your kids to Fest?
I mean, they learned, the fascinating thing about them going to Fest is they grew up as social animals who were flexible people, right? So that, when we drive with them, we wake them up and throw them in the car and then they wake up at a new place. They're just more flexible people because we didn't We did make sure they slept because that's really important for kids. But they can wake up and go back to sleep at the drop of a hat because of the lifestyle that we gave them. So overall, no. I mean, sure, there's some times where you want it to be upfront at Galactic on the Ray-Ban stage or the Gentilly stage or whatever they called it that particular year. And you have to kind of sit back in the tree with the shade, but it's really fun watching them bounce around. And they grew up at fests, talking to people like you, like talking to adults, going to the kids' tent and listening to stories, learning to, like we would bring toys like balloons. I think every year we bring something for kids who were crying. And their job would be, if they saw a crying kid, was to give them a balloon. And so that really made it fun for them. They were like on the lookout for like crying kids, and trying to make other people's lives better, which was just a nice way to like kind of incorporate them into the spirit of New Orleans.
So do you think that they'll go on their own as adults?
Yeah, I think there's this interim period where all they listen to now is rap and hip hop, where they kind of don't get it, but they're hilarious. They're shocked that not everybody knows who JJ Grey and Mofro is, or they're shocked that Andrew Duhon isn't a huge star. Like they don't know though. Like Alex McMurray. What do you mean nobody knows who Alex McMurray is? They think that's like the Rolling Stones. They've started to realize it's not the case, but they're surprised by those things. And sometimes they pretend they don't like our music, but my daughter's favorite band right now is the Revivalists. They have playlists that include many of the CDs on the back wall.
I love that. I'm so happy to hear that they're like carrying the torch. Even if maybe it's a little lower than like you hope it would be, they're carrying that torch, man.
No. And Nate, I think this year he just turned 21. So he has friends who are meeting in New Orleans for a big Florida LSU game. And it happens to be one of the weekends that Jazz Fest is happening. So he's going to try to like go to that game and then come hang out with us at Jazz Fest. So nice. He's looking forward to it. So I think they would definitely, Nicole, I think they'll definitely come back.
Well, I hope that I get to meet them. So actually, speaking of them hanging out with adults and whatnot, tell us a little bit how you learned about the Threadheads and what's been your involvement with them.
Yeah, so my second year, we didn't want to sleep under a dining room table any longer. So we decided that we needed to find some kind of place to live, Airbnb before there was Airbnb, right? So there was this chat room, and I was talking to this guy named Jeff and another guy named Jerry, and they had an apartment in the quarter, and they were jazz nuts, right? And they both had wives with them first weekend, and second weekend they didn't have wives with them, and so we were going that weekend. So we stayed with Jeff and Jerry, and we stayed with them both almost every year until they both have since passed away, but until they couldn't come anymore or they died, either one of the two. So we met them on the message board, and my wife was like, "We are not staying with two guys who you met on a message board," like because back then message boards were a little sketchy, right? But we did. We got the apartment with them. We stayed with them. It was it was a great experience, and ever since then, it's been a resource that I've used forever.
Before I ask the next question, Nicole, I don't know if you know, Jordan has a mailing list that he sends out, I think like once a quarter or something. Mm-hmm. And it's for those the people who are listening to this, it's an amazing list of, Jordan, I think you divide it into shows you're definitely going to see, shows that you would want to see if you had unlimited time and money, some sort of categorization.
Yeah, I do two things. Right. Yeah, Chris, I do two things. One is that's just a list of shows in and around New York City. And some people outside New York City like to get it because the bands that I'm seeing will eventually come over to like Pennsylvania or wherever else. So they like the dates don't line up, but they know that they're probably in town somewhere. The other thing I send out is that crazy Excel spreadsheet of night shows that is much more like that I would go see, where they're all color coded in an Excel spreadsheet of like blue I have tickets to, green I'm definitely going, orange. I'm hope to be going in yellow, maybe. And it's really my edited version of the grids. Because people keep asking where I'm going to be or what should I go see, and it's much easier to just hand them that or send them a link to that particular doc.
So the Jazz Fest lineup, as you know, is at least part of the lineup is out. Who are you looking forward to see?
I guess what I saw in there was the Campbell Brothers. That was the one that just jumped out at me. I think, I read it every year and then forget it promptly. I think Melissa Etheridge was on there too. I think I've seen her once. Yeah. But everything else is just, I go mostly for the local bands. Like I think the stage I'm at most is Lanyard. You could definitely, I don't think I've ever gone a day without going to Lanyard. I've gone many days without going to either big stage. And I rarely go into the jazz tent. So gospel, lanyap, fado do, whatever. But blues, I'm all over the place at the different tents. But so I never really pay attention to it because I don't have to worry about it because I'm going both weekends. You know what I mean? So I don't have to worry about what I'm missing yet until later on, until the cubes actually come out.
Do you ever go to the 3 big stages?
I do, but I'm always in the standing area. Like I never set up a blanket or a chair or a thing like that. I have friends who are in chairs and blankets and I can find them. But yeah, I'm pretty much a mercenary, like hit the stage, leave, like hit the stage. And then the minute they start introducing the band, it's time to go. Because,
yeah,
but there are rules. Like I do have rules, internal rules. Like and the most important one I would give people is there are 2. You can only do what you can do, right? So don't try to do more than you can do. You'll be miserable. And the other one is never leave good music for potentially good music. Like if you're seeing a good set, just enjoy it, and that's hard for me because I'm always like, oh my God, there's something else I really want to see. But so many times I've gone to that other thing and it's been, I can't believe I left that set. So as I've gotten better at it, and also there's lots of bands you can see out at night also, so you don't have to necessarily see them at the Fairgrounds.
That's a good point. And you do truly seem to be everywhere. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I wander into the Lanyap stage, let alone out at night, and I'll be like, who do I know? Who do I know? Oh, well, of course, Jordan's here. That means I'm in the right place. I found the best place to be because Jordan is here. I honestly feel that way sometimes, particularly at night, even though you're everywhere. So you already gave us a few tips, some wisdom, very important wisdom on how to kind of be everywhere and live the Jordan and Nancy, fest experience. Do you have any other tips, like maybe bands or clubs that newcomers might want to keep an eye out, or like strategies they could employ?
Like really, I guess there are a couple things. One is some of the best clubs are the smallest clubs. And I feel that about New York too, or anywhere. Like if I end up going to, I think I end up going to Howlin' Wolf like once a fest or maybe twice, because it's just so big. And I'd much rather go to like Carrollton Station and hear Grayson Capps do a gig, or some small place. Also, if there's a club that we've never been to, we almost always make a point of going to that. Like going to see Lynn Drury at Carrie's Irish Pub or whatever. So those little gigs are always the ones I like more than the big ones. But of course, Tipitina's is amazing, and I will go there 2 or 3 times at a fest probably. And the other thing I would say is the smaller your group is, the easier it is to move around. Like I'm really thoughtful when I'm not in New Orleans about making sure all my friends are having a good time and making sure that I'm babysitting them if they're in a new experience or whatever. But New Orleans is not that for me. New Orleans is like, here's what I'm doing. If you want to come, you're welcome to come, but don't slow me down. Because there was one year, like we went around with a group of like 7 people, and Nancy and I, and someone was, oh my God, I forgot my phone, or oh my God, I have to go to the bathroom. And then you're moving at a snail's pace from place to place and you never get to where you're going. So I'm like, it's fine. We'll meet up. Like I'm going to go to the Circle Bar. I'll see you later at Tips. That's totally okay. There's enough, it's a small enough city. There's enough places to go. And if I don't run into you, it's okay. I'll see you at the fairgrounds. I'll see you at wherever else later. And it's easier now with phones.
The last question on our list is how do you think Jazz Fest differs from other music festivals you've gone to? But I want to ditch that question for a second.
Okay, yeah.
I want to ask, because you sort of answered it already, but I want to ask you about your CD collection. How many CDs do you have?
In a range of 5,000.
Wow.
And it's because there's two things. One is when I was in high school, my dad worked for Time Warner. So we
My
were
mom
like
did.
Oh, really?
Sorry, my mom did.
That's okay.
And I got a bazillion CDs from that. Go ahead. It's your story.
Exactly. So we were like a radio station. So we got all the CDs and I kept the ones I wanted. And that was kind of how I started. But every time I go see a band, I pretty much buy the CD because that's the only way to support the artist, really. I mean, you can tip them, but I like having, and the CDs are ridiculous because I don't have a way to play them any longer. So what I do is I rip every one of them and they're on a hard drive and I listen to them that way. But I like having the physical media. So like it's because I like being able to look at them. And it gives me, like I spent a lot of this COVID building these shelves and putting them up so I could look at the CDs. So that's one. And the other thing that I do is Nancy and I, whenever we go see a band, like at a smaller place, there's a place in New York called the Rockwood Music Hall, which is a good example. Or similar in New Orleans would be like DBA, right? Where they have like 3 bands playing. And our process is always, you go see the band, the warm-up band, you see the regular band, and you stay for at least 2 songs in the next band, because that could be your next favorite band. Mm. And when they are, or when they're at least good enough, I will buy their CD. When I stay for their whole set, I'll buy their CD. So that's the way I support musicians. And the last piece is during COVID, what I've been doing is I haven't been able to go to gigs, but I have been able to look at the releases of new music or go to used CD stores and listen to Spotify and figure out, like, oh, here's a band that sounds like they have Painted Birds. That sounds like a cool name. Let me go check, let me listen to them. I like it, I'll buy the CD. To support those artists, either on a used basis or new releases that have come out from people who like the new Dumpster Funk album. I haven't, I didn't go to their show because there was no show, but I will when I'm in New Orleans, but I bought their CD ahead of time.
I'll share this thought because it's adjacent to what you just said. But, coming out of the pandemic, I was discussing with some of my music friends, what are your plans? Like, what's everyone got on their schedule like this summer? And I wasn't alone in saying that I wasn't really jumping to buy really expensive tickets to go to like a big venue, not necessarily because of the public safety aspect, but I was like, you know what? One thing that this pandemic has taught me, among many, many, many things, is that I really love, like, this is going to sound like kind of high and mighty. I love supporting people's dreams. Like, I want to spend the money on somebody who's doing their concert once a week and preparing their material and sharing it with whoever just dialed in that evening. I just feel like I get so much more out of that. And a big part of that is buying their gear or buying their merch, paying for the Bandcamp album, paying for every Bandcamp release that they bring out, saving it for Bandcamp Friday so that they get all the proceeds and whatnot. And I just feel like you're a kindred spirit and mind in that regard. And I learned a lot from hanging out with folks like you and Nancy, who really like walk the walk on stuff like that, or walk the talk, all of that, on that sort of stuff.
That and Patreon is the other one. Like, Patreon is amazing. I really think it goes back to like in medieval times when you had like the house, like the court painter, and you paid them to create art. And I feel like with Patreon, like Alex McMurray's Patreon or Andrew Duhan's or Lynn Drury's or whoever, it's $5 a month or whatever amount you want to give them. And that allows them to create art, which makes me happy. So, those are the New Orleans acts that I can think of that we support, but there are others. And it's really, I think it's a really interesting way for musicians to make a living so that they can continue to produce music that I love.
Yeah, I feel that. And when I think back on all of those weeks, especially like this time last year, I don't remember what we binge watched, if we binge watched anything. But I remember dialing into Alex's Tuesday night shows every Tuesday and hearing his stories and his, experiencing his sense of humor and feeling connected to my friends who also dialed into that, or the Thursday night low cut Connie shows and stuff. That's the stuff I remember. I don't remember what we watched on Netflix.
Right. And I will say that it was harder for me to get into the online music thing because so many of them had so many audio issues, and it just didn't feel the same. There's something about live music that is just better, and I try to describe this to my kids all the time. You may not love it on CD, but it's like 2 notches harder. Like rock and roll is 2 notches harder live than it is on CD. It has two notches more teeth than it does regular. And that is something that's kind of amazing.
Jordan, you're a true music fan, and it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys for doing this. It's really been fun listening to, and it's a nice way to connect with everybody who we haven't seen. But don't be scared about bringing your kids to Jazz Fest. Don't be scared about going to night shows. We have a friend who's a dentist named Doc Rich, and he used to only go to Jazz Fest, and he was like, I'm too old to go to night shows. I can't do both. And now he does it all the time because it's just too hard not to do it. I remember when we first started going to Jazz Fest, in the days in between, we would get out of town because it was too tiring. And then we couldn't because there was too much music to miss in those days in between. And so you can do it. It's really fun.
Well, I can't wait to chase you and Nancy around. You'll be there in October?
Yeah, that's the plan. Yeah, we definitely will. Yeah, I have a place to stay. I have a flight. I just need to get I guess a brass pass or something.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to hit and record here. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Hold on.